Hey, Arlo and Frank. Grandpa coming to you from Timicuan Visitor Center. I was outside and it got real windy and everything. And it looked like it might even rain. There's a chance of rain today. So I figured I'd come in the van again and use it as a studio. Today I want to do a speech on why I left Toastmasters. I originally did an iteration of this speech a couple weeks ago at the Toastmasters in Jack's Beach, although it's really not in Jack's Beach. But it's the Jack's Beach Toastmasters. And when I got up there, I was planning on asking somebody to videotape it and then post it. And I realized that in the allotted time that they had given me, and they asked how much time I needed, and I needed 15 minutes, but I told them 8 to 10 minutes. I lied to them. And I'll get into all that about the time limits in Toastmasters. But I realized that even in 15 minutes that I couldn't say everything I needed to say. Toastmasters is a cool organization. I am not saying anything in this to disparage Toastmasters or the people in it. I have some friends, lifelong friends now, who I met in Toastmasters. There are some people that get involved in it maybe for the wrong reasons, but that's okay, because if you're involved in it for the right reason, you'll know when to get out. And this also is not to discourage you from joining Toastmasters. Toastmasters is a great place to learn how to be a better public speaker. Frank and Arlo, you should both try it. Arlo, you're 3. They're not going to let you in now. When they will, I think you have to be 18 to be in. Maybe 21. But Frank, you should join now. It's always a good idea to be a better public speaker, to be able to get in front of people and lay out an argument. So anyway, I'm going to do 3 things in this video. The first thing is I'm going to proffer an apology to my fellow Toastmasters of the past. And second, I'm going to present a conundrum to those who are currently still in Toastmasters. And then third, I'm going to give advice to present Toastmasters, especially new ones, on 5 different subjects. When I was in Toastmasters, both in Miami and Jacksonville Beach, the 2 clubs that I was in, I ran mentor programs, and I really enjoyed doing that. I enjoy helping people learn how to become better speakers, to get the most that they can out of themselves. So that last part is probably going to be the biggest part of the speech. Well, the video. And that's because it's one of the things that I grew to love when I was in Toastmasters. And it's one of the things that I'll miss. There's a lot that I won't miss, but one thing is mentoring people. If you're out there and you're not Frank and Arlo, you can always contact your grandpop and ask him to help you with a speech. But if you're out there and you're in Toastmasters and you need to bounce ideas off of somebody, my contact information, well, you can just comment. I'll be reading all the comments on this. And so if you need that, just give me a way to contact you, whatever, I guess phone number, and you can bounce ideas off me, ask questions, anything like that. I'm not a perfect public speaker, but I learned enough to be able to do this, what I'm doing now. So, the apology, the first part, what am I going to apologize for? Well, I'm going to apologize because I originally joined Toastmasters for purely selfish reasons. I was teaching a class while I worked at the IRS, and somebody came up to me and said, that class was really good. I said, oh, thank you. And he said, you should go to Toastmasters. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, your class was really good. You were well prepared. It was interesting, and I learned a lot from it. But you could become a much better public speaker. And I went, So when I got back to Miami, I Googled Toastmasters, and I had heard of their organization. And I found one in downtown Miami and went there and eventually joined. And then as I got to retirement, I said, well, what am I going to do with myself after retirement? I started representing taxpayers because I can legally do that. I'm licensed to do that because of what I did at the IRS. And represent them before the IRS, it's boring. I've not done much of it, and I just don't have a heart for that. But I decided that I wanted to be a full-time public speaker. And so selfishly, I joined because I wanted to improve my public speaking. And then that morphed into wanting to become good enough to do public speaking full-time. And that eventually morphed into doing these YouTube videos. So I didn't really have any interest in anything else. And this is why I say selfish reasons. I didn't want to be an officer. I got cajoled into being an officer in Miami twice. I was the sergeant at arms, and people go like, oh yeah, you were a cop. It's perfect for you. Well, they also say things to me, like this dive club that I'm in, they wanted me to be the treasurer because they said, well, you worked at the IRS, that's right up your alley. Well, being a treasurer because you worked at the IRS assumes that you know a lot about bookkeeping and budgeting and all that stuff, and that wasn't what I did at the IRS. But people just, they can justify in their minds, oh, this is why we're going to cajole this person into doing this, because it's right up their alley. Well, with Toastmasters in Miami, they said, well, you're going to be the sergeant at arms. So I was supposed to bring all the junk to the meeting. They have banners and flags and all kinds of things, podium. But I couldn't do that. So I was the sergeant at arms in name only. But if I had been something else, I wouldn't have been able to put my heart into the job. Being a Toastmaster is a part-time job. And I'm not talking about being a Toastmaster, being the president of your local chapter or club, whatever they call them. I'm talking about being a Toastmaster. You're going to spend 10 to 20 hours developing the idea for a speech, writing the speech, getting it, practicing the speech, getting it down to, hey, this is supposed to be a 7 to 9 minute speech, which I think is what most of them are supposed to be. Because they have contests and they want you to be in the contest. Well, that takes time. And so I had a full-time job, and then my part-time job was becoming a better public speaker. But I didn't really want to be involved in anything else because it didn't do anything for me. So if you go to Toastmasters as a young person, you have an opportunity to learn leadership skills. I didn't need to do that. I was at the end of my career. I didn't need to be an officer. I told the officers, if you ever need to run an idea past me, if you want advice, whatever, I'm there for you. Just give me a holler. But I don't want to be involved in this stuff because it just isn't, it's not something that I'm going to spend my time on. It's not worth it for me. Is that selfish? Yeah, I guess in a certain way it is. But sometimes in life you have to be selfish. But I'm hoping that any Toastmaster who's watching this video also owes an apology to everybody else because they've joined for purely selfish reasons. Nobody joins because they want to make Toastmasters better. They join because they want to make themselves better. And you have to watch out that you don't run down a rabbit hole. So next up is the conundrum. And the conundrum is this. I've seen many come to Toastmasters that had tons of potential, already fairly good public speakers like I was, used to getting up in front of people and talking like I was. They just needed to work on some things, and they started to make leaps and bounds in improving their public speaking. And the next thing you know, poof, they were gone, never to be heard from again. I'm friends with a couple of the ones that I observed this, and I'm friends with them on Facebook, and so I contacted them and said, how come I haven't seen you? Oh, well, you know, my life is busy, and I just don't have the time for it. Another person said, I just got engaged, and my fiance is, my, whatever you call a man fiance, because it was a woman. My fiance doesn't want me to spend that much time doing it. But for both of those people, and every other time that I've seen people disappear, it was because they were asked to do something. And going to Toastmasters, you're going to be asked to do things. You're going to be asked to get up in front of people and speak. The first time that you're there, if you're willing to do it, you're going to get up during table topics, and you're going to be given a question. You're going to have 2 minutes to answer it. And you're going to be up there going, humming, 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 but that's okay. It's part of the process. So you want to challenge people, but then if you ask them, like, hey, you know, you've been here 6 months, you should be the president, you should be the, you know, the vice president. They have a zillion bureaucratic positions. Like, I think there might be 8 bureaucratic positions in every chapter, club, whatever. So you ask people to do something, and they're there to become a better public speaker. So you have to be cognizant of the fact that if you're challenging them to become a better public speaker, they're probably going to still come. And if they don't, well, hey, not everybody's cut out to be a Toastmaster. Not everybody's cut out to be a public speaker. But when you start to ask them to do other things, to be a judge in a contest, or be in a contest before it's time, or the big one is run for office before the time is right, they're going to leave. And the reason they're going to leave is most people are unlike me. Most people can't say no. So their way of no is, okay, and then they just never come back. And that sucks. And then also, there's some people that have been there for a while, and then they just disappear. Like, I had a mentor down in Miami, and she was an amazing public speaker. She always had good advice for me. I didn't get to know her very well. I don't have her phone number or anything. I only would talk to her when I was there, because it was all in person back when I started. And then one day she just wasn't there anymore. And it was soon after she did an incredible speech. She gave out trash bags. She found different types of trash bags. She gave them out. Everybody in the room got one. They weren't all different, but they were, and you know, we're sitting there with our trash bags and looking and going, okay, well, our trash bags are different. And she said, well, you know, what do you think of this? Which one of these is better than the others? And you know, we're sitting there like, what's she getting at? And she said, but out of all these, which one of these bags would you want to carry your luggage in if you were going to the airport? And everybody just laughed and went, well, we wouldn't want to carry it in any of them. And she said, well, if you were a young lady who was, I don't know if they were incarcerated, but they were people who were indigent. They were people who needed help more than anything else. A lot of times there were young moms, pregnant women and stuff, and they were going from one facility to another, and they were given a trash bag to move their clothes with. And it's like, you know, they could have some sort of luggage that they let you move it with, and then you get the luggage back. So we could keep using it over and over again, because people need dignity. It was a great speech. And then she was gone. And I asked a couple people that knew her better than I did, like, well, what happened? No, we don't know. We don't know. But it's a conundrum. And you folks, especially that are current officers, or the ones that every once in a while run for officer and you've been there forever, you need to work on that. You need to put focus on that problem. I'm guessing that my former mentor burned out. I hope it wasn't anything that I did. I remember that there was this one person there that evaluated me on a speech. And one thing that I do is I point during the speech. A lot of famous speakers, Billy Graham, different presidents. I think Jimmy Carter was a pointer, and Bill Clinton would go like this when he was speaking. And this woman said that I had to stop doing that. Now, this wasn't my mentor. This was a different lady. Said that I had to stop doing that because I was demeaning people by pointing at them. It meant that I thought that I was better than them. Well, that's crazy. And I'll get into what happens when you get evaluated and you don't agree with it in a few minutes. So my advice on the 5 Toastmaster topics. And the first one is impromptu speaking. Like I said, the first night, or day that you go to a Toastmasters meeting, there's probably going to be table topics, and they're going to have either a series of questions or one question. They're going to try to get you to think on your feet and speak, sometimes about something that you know nothing about, and just to work on it. The more you do that, the better you become at it. Well, here's my advice on how to become a better impromptu speaker, to do better in table topics every time you get called on to participate in one. And that is, if you're always working on your next couple of speeches, you'll never be at a loss for words. When you're working on speeches, you have things that happen in a certain logical progression, but certain things that just happen. Ideas pop at you. So you're going to have this thing called pathway, and pathway is going to be one of, I think there were 7 things, like, being a good presenter, being a leader. I don't remember what the rest of them were, but they're very interesting. And the speeches that they have in the program, there's maybe 15 speeches that you have to complete before you're done that pathway, are going to take you from an icebreaker to doing a long speech, a 20 to 30 minute speech, and then reflecting back on your pathway to say what you learned. So you're going to have an overarching topic probably in your pathway. It usually has something to do with your life. If you're an athlete, you're going to talk a lot about, if you're a runner, well, I did a marathon and this is how I prepared for the marathon, and I went over here to do this marathon and these crazy things happened to me. A lot of your speeches are going to have to do with your personal life. And so you're going to have a progression of these speeches, and you're going to know, like, okay, this is my next speech. I've already written it. I'm practicing it. I have another speech after that, and I already have a brief outline down. I know what the subject heading is, and I know what the outline is of it. And then I have another speech that's 2 in the future after this one that I'm doing maybe tonight, that I'm working on. I'm doing my last second prep on it. I have another one for maybe a month from now, 2 months from now, however often you like to do your speeches. And that's just a concept. So maybe you have 1 or 2 things written down. But in all of this, you're doing all the kind of things that your mind needs to do to be able to get up and be given a subject, like, bam, here, talk about this, and be able to do it. Trust me, work on your next couple speeches all the time, and you'll become a better impromptu speaker. And I'm only giving you little tidbits here. I'm not giving you A to Z, this is how to be an impromptu speaker. But these are just little things that I've learned. Number 2 is giving speeches. Get as much of your speech into your speech as you possibly can. Now, what do I mean by that? I would write out a speech, usually in outline form. Sometimes I would write it out, like in prose, and then I might save that, print it out or something, but then I would reduce the prose down to, bullet points. And in doing all that, you're becoming familiar with it. And you should always, if you can, give speeches on things that you know a lot about. If you're not an astrophysicist, don't do a speech on astrophysics, because you're going to have to learn a whole bunch of stuff to give that speech. If you're a fisherman, give a speech on fishing, because you know about it. You're going to be more interesting when you give a speech on what you know about. But I would do that. I would have this written speech, and then I would put that written speech down and get up and give a speech, and people would always commend me, like, oh, you never have notes up there with you. Well, I might leave a third of the speech out. You might say, well, you're just practicing when you're in Toastmasters. Toastmasters isn't real life, so that's okay. And I did learn a lot by getting up and doing that. The last time I gave a speech at Toastmasters, when I was still a member, I actually gave my notes to the evaluator so she would know what I forgot to put in the speech. So now, when I do these videos, I unashamedly have notes, and I look away. I don't make eye contact all the time. I look away. You need to wrestle with that. You need to figure out what the best way for you to get the most of your speech into your speech when you're up there giving it as possible. Now, here's another thing about speaking, the content of your speech. Try not to be formulaic. Now, I'm going to say that, but then I'm going to tell you a formula. So, but here's a formula that you don't want to follow. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. That's a formula for teaching somebody something. You teach a class, you get up there and say, here's the objectives of the class. We're going to learn this, and this. Then you give the class. At the end of the class, you go, hey, let's look at the objectives again. Did you learn this? Did you learn this? And that's a good thing. But does it make a compelling speech? When you give a speech, what you want to do is to inspire people to either believe something, do something, or both believe something and do something. So you need an introduction, and you need a body, and then your ending, which is a call to action. So in that, you may tell them a little bit about what you're going to tell them, then tell them at the end what you just told them. That might be part of it, but it's not all of it. If you want to be formulaic, try this formula. Get their attention. That's your introduction. Get their attention. I'm not saying be over the top, be ludicrous, but you want people to go, wow, I really want to listen to what this guy is saying, what his speech is going to be. And then second, make your case. Don't just state your case. Make your case. Every time you develop a speech for Toastmasters or any place else, you should have a purpose. And your speech should be to convince people that your purpose is correct. So to do that, you have to not just state your case, you need to make your case. You need to prove your case to them. And then number 3, at the end, ask them to do something. So, do you doubt me? Because when I gave this at Toastmasters, I was told by a couple people, oh, I believe in the tell them what you're going to tell them thing. Well, they can believe that. And both of those people are good public speakers. But what kind of speeches do you hear all the time? You go in to buy a car. The salesman gives you a sales pitch. It's a speech. That speech has a goal. That speech has the guy getting your attention look at this one right here. This one checks all your boxes, and it's cherry red. And he's looking at you to see your reaction. And let me tell you about this car. 4 on the floor, double overhead cams, blah, 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 whatever it is. And then at the end of it, he goes, are you going to finance it, or do you just want to buy it cash? So that's a speech. That's a successful speech. If the guy goes, okay, I'm going to try to sell you a car, and then he gives the meat of his speech, and then he, at the end of it, goes, okay, I just tried to sell you a car. That's kind of lame. And I mean, I'm being sarcastic saying it that way, but you'll do an okay speech by tell them what you're going to tell them method. But if you get their attention and make your case and ask them to do something, you're going to be a much better speaker. People are going to want to hear you more than they're not. So, and if you still don't believe me, read a famous speech. I mean, was Abraham Lincoln a good speaker? Yeah, but he didn't tell him what he was going to tell him. Read the Gettysburg Address. Read Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. He's not formulaic. Neither of them are formulaic. The formula is King based his speech, the very beginning of his speech, on the Gettysburg Address, because he was standing in front of the Lincoln Memorial Monument. I always get the memorials and monuments mixed up. And I mean, or look at a speech that's modern and silly, like Seth MacFarlane at the Harvard, what was it called? The Harvard Day speech in 2006 or 2007, where he does Stewie and Peter, and he doesn't do Brian. I think he does Quagmire. It was a great speech, but it wasn't, a formulaic, lame speech. Next up, this is the third subject I want to give you a couple pearls of wisdom on. And I can see I'm already over 30 minutes. If I had done this at the Toastmasters meeting, they would have been freaking out. They would have just stopped my speech after maybe, I think the speech ran 16 and a half minutes. If I got to 20 minutes, they would have just gone like, oh, no, listen, we're just cutting this off. Your icebreaker is your first speech. It's only 5 to 7 minutes. Also, don't be formulaic about that. I mentored this lady, and she gave her icebreaker speech, and she told something about who she was, which is what you should do. And the evaluator got up and went, well, it was a good speech, although it wasn't what I would consider an icebreaker. An icebreaker is when you say, this is my name, and this is my education, and this is, I'm from this state, and, I love my children, and blah, 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 blah. But that's really not, that's not breaking the ice with people. That's just giving them information about you. So the way that I say it to people is, when you go on a first date with somebody, you say a lot of boring things. So for me, it would be like, oh, I'm a jogger, and but I'm injured right now, and I love craft beer, and I love to go walking on the beach. That's all good to know if you're the other person sitting across the table. Like, okay, do I want to go on a second date with somebody like this, but you're not really showing a lot of who you are. You're just saying some things that you like, some things about you, but they're not who you are. And then at the other end of the spectrum, from the speech that you give on your first date, when the person goes, tell me a little bit about Frank Clark. You go, oh, well, Frank Clark, blah, blah, blah. At the other end of the spectrum is stuff about you that you wouldn't even tell your spouse. That's how, like, threatening it is to you. That you would tell a psychotherapist trying to figure all that crap out about your life. Well, nobody wants to hear the first date stuff, and trust me, nobody wants to hear the psychoanalytical stuff. But somewhere in between those 2 points is a fascinating part of you, and you want to share that. Maybe you have an odd hobby. Maybe you have an affiliation with an organization or something that makes you who you are. I am a descendant of a signer of the Declaration of Independence. I did a video on that. His name's John Hart. That's an icebreaker. I'm breaking the ice with people. To break the ice with people, you want to show them a little fascinating part of what makes you you, and have them want to know more about you. Because you're not teaching them about you. You're telling them a little bit about you. You're showing them some of you. The fourth subject is evaluations. Stephen Covey talked about this in the 7 Habits of Excruciatingly Painful People, or whatever the book is called. Listen to understand, not to respond. There are Toastmaster Nazis. Like I said, that lady said that pointing at her was demeaning, and it wasn't. I went to another Toastmasters in the Jacksonville area, and the people were very nice. Like I say, none of this is to put Toastmasters or the people down. People were very nice, but they get a culture that forms around each club. And so with this one, I got up and I gave a speech. I was practicing the speech. It's a speech that I had given other places already, and it was received well. And I wanted to practice it one more time before I did it in Jacksonville when I got there. And I got up, did my speech, sat down. When it was time for the evaluations, this lady got up there. And she said, well, yeah, you know, it was a good speech, as speeches go, but you just are not animated enough. You just stood there almost still. You hardly walked around the room. And I'm like, what the hell is this lady talking about? So they had another speaker. I went there again. And another speaker who had been there for a long time. This lady was like a distinguished Toastmaster, whatever that is. Guess it means you've been there for a while and you did a lot of speeches. But this other guy was a distinguished Toastmaster. And he got up there and he was all animated and stuff. And his speech was okay, but it was creepy. Like, it was over animated. There's a thing in Hamlet where it's called the play within the play, and these players come in and Hamlet wants them to put on a specific play, that the plot of the play is exactly how his uncle killed his dad. And he wants to see what the uncle's reaction is as he watches the play. So Hamlet comes in and tells him the play he wants him to do, and they go, yeah, we can do that. And then he gives them advice, and he says, like, don't walk around the stage and flail your arms like crazy. Just stay under control and deliver the lines correctly and all that. I'm paraphrasing, of course. But that's what it reminded me of when I saw this guy like flailing his arms. But that was the culture there, so there's Nazis, the Toastmaster Nazis. In that one, you had to be over animated, or you weren't a good public speaker. Well, I knew that was not true. You know, I got many evaluations where the person would go, well, your speech was okay, it was a good speech, but what I want to see is, and that's fine if they say, what I want to see is you practice more. What I want to see is you video yourself, because you should always do that. Video yourself and then watch yourself, and you'll become a better public speaker. What I'd like to see you do is develop that subject more. But it was like, I would have people say what I would like to see, and then it was a different subject. Like, I would like to see you talk about this part of your life, not this part of your life. That kind of thing. I don't know if that ever happened, but that kind of thing, like, well, so you're changing the subject of my speech? And they didn't give me any kind of a reason that was compelling that I would go, oh yeah, I picked a bad subject. I hadn't picked a bad subject. It just was, the person was sitting there going, oh, I wish he was talking about this. And then that became their evaluation. Like, you have to remember, you're there to help them. Another thing is people like to get up there, the Nazis, and they want to show you how much they know about public speaking. But it's not about that. It's about you becoming a better public speaker and them becoming a better evaluator, because that's part of it. Is just because this person's saying something to you doesn't mean that they know what they're talking about. Quite often, they don't know what they're talking about. So you have to sit there and go, okay, yeah, I think this person's full of crap, but I'm going to smile, say, oh, thank you very much for your feedback. Now, here's another thing to stay away from. Don't tell them good things because you're about to tell them something bad. Like, oh, I really like how you did this and this, and this was spectacular. Yeah, but the rest of your speech was dog crap. If it's got but in the middle of the sentence, don't do it. Here's a better idea. With kindness and honesty, tell the person what they did, and then give them one thing that they can work on. Just say you watch a speech that's horrible, everything about it's wrong. If you get up there, and you only have a certain amount of time to evaluate, I don't know what that is, maybe 2 minutes. You get up there and you just go, okay, you need to work on this and this and this and this and this. That's worthless to somebody. But if you can pick out one thing, and if it's possible, it's one thing that they can easily change, so that the next time they speak, they're a better public speaker, then you killed it. Oh, I'm sorry, I pointed at you. I'm demeaning you. You killed it as an evaluator. Yeah, I had a manager who would call me up and go, oh, I just wanted to call you to tell you that I appreciate that you did blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, that happened a month ago. And you did blah, blah, blah. And that happened 2 weeks ago. But, and I knew that there was a but coming. Because the reason that she was calling me was because she wanted to give me bad news. Well, why not just go, look, I'm calling, this is bad news. And I'm calling you for this. I'm a big boy. I can take it. So, and then how to be evaluated. And I kind of talked about this a second ago, but that person's learning how to be an evaluator. So be kind to them too. You have to evaluate what they said to you. You have to decide. You have to chew up the meat and spit out the bones. And you don't have to take any advice that they gave you. And you can even talk to other people, especially if you have a mentor. You can talk to the mentor and go, look, this person said that I did this incorrectly, and I don't agree with that. What do you think? Well, you might find out that your mentor agrees with you. Or maybe your mentor is going to go, well, I understand what they're saying. I would have had you change that, but I would have done something differently. So you have to keep working on your game. And then the fifth and final thing before I close this, and we're over 45 minutes now, is serving the club. I didn't really serve the club, although I did run the mentor programs in Miami and Jack's Beach. But I didn't serve as an officer. I didn't do contests. I don't care about contests. I don't care about doing something in 7 to 9 minutes, although you have to learn that. You have to become good at that. I can do a speech in 7 to 9 minutes, but I was preparing to do bigger and better things. I'm not doing these in 7 to 9 minutes. I had somebody critique evaluate my videos on YouTube and said, oh, they're way too long. I don't have any time to spend like a half an hour watching a video. Yeah, but who does? Barlow does. Frank does. I'm making these videos for you guys. Anybody else that's blessed by them, but that's just icing on the cake. I'm putting them on YouTube because I can share them with you guys on YouTube. And YouTube just happens to be a place where the entire world can eavesdrop and check it out. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing that can happen, and I hope that I can help people. But I'm going to help them, and this will be over 50 minutes by the time it's done. It's not going to be in 7 to 9 minutes. So if you don't want to learn about leadership and working with others in a bureaucracy, or doing things like social media to attract people, or running a budget, don't be an officer. But if you need those things in your game, if you need to learn how to use social media to attract customers, well, become whatever the vice president of social media, whatever that person's called, or the vice president of finance. If you need how to run a budget, you're going to have $30 a year. It's not going to be much of a budget, but you're going to get to learn the rudiments of how to run a budget. And so you'll be able to do that. And you'll have people working with you, the other officers, who are going to help you elevate your game. You'll probably have a CPA there, or somebody who can go, well, look, if you had a real budget, this is what you would be doing. So you want to do that. You can have mentors. People think about the mentoring program as being for the speakers, but it's also for the officers. It's a great place to learn how to work in a bureaucracy, how to play nice in the sandbox with other people. But if you don't, then be upfront about that. If you don't want to serve as an officer, just say no. Be Nancy Reagan. Just say no. But if you become an officer, serve with passion. As a public speaker, speak with passion. As a Toastmasters officer, serve with passion. Now, I left Toastmasters because it served its purpose and it was time to leave. Most of the people that leave never get a chance to say goodbye. But I went back and said goodbye to the Jack's Beach people and got some closure. But I didn't get to say goodbye to the Miami people. So now there's this video. And I get my closure. And I get to go on to the next chapter of my life with a clean break. Some people stay in Toastmasters forever. But some stay for just a season. But be selfish. Learn how to say no so you can stay long enough to accomplish your goals. And then if it's time for you to leave, leave. And get the most that you can out of Toastmasters. But trust me, you need to put a lot into it too. Peace out, guys.